I thought it was just a letter. But the moment I opened it, my whole world cracked. It wasn't just about cheating, it was about power, secrets, and money. The man I married was living a double life. And now? I'm about to expose it all. The day I found it, hidden beneath a pile of bills and junk mail, was the day everything started to unravel. Ethan's handwriting stood out against the stark white envelope, delicate and flowing, as if it were crafted not just for the eye, but for the soul. I didn't know why, but something about it made my heart race. It wasn't the first letter I had opened of his. After 3 years of marriage, I had become accustomed to sorting through our daily correspondence. But this one? This one felt different. My breath hitched as I traced the letters on the envelope, each one seeming more like a symbol than just a collection of words. I heard his footsteps coming down the stairs, and I quickly shoved the letter to the bottom of the stack, trying to act normal. Ethan entered, looking every bit the successful businessman I had married, his perfectly pressed shirt and designer watch a stark contrast to my worn-out bookstore apron. He crossed the room with his usual confident smile, his presence like a solid wall I had always leaned against. But today, something inside me felt shaky, unsure. "You okay?" he asked, brushing a gentle kiss on my forehead. "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. I could feel the letter pressing against the pit of my stomach, as if it were alive. But what did it say? What was it hiding? Ethan didn't notice my unease. He never did, at least not in the last few months. "How about pizza for dinner?" he suggested. I could hear his mother's voice in my head already, another charity event, another obligation I had been too eager to forget. "Oh, sweetheart, remember," he continued, checking his watch. "Mother's hosting that thing at the house, we need to be there by 7. "Right. Another Caldwell family event. Eleanor's fundraiser." The night before, I had already been too tired to engage in their world of power and image, yet here it was, demanding my presence again. "I'll change in a bit," I said, forcing myself to smile. But before I could move, he surprised me. "Actually, why don't you skip this one?" His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone I couldn't place. "You've been working so hard lately. Take the evening off. Relax." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Ethan had never suggested I skip a family event. His mother would never allow it, and he knew it. "Are you sure? Won't your mom mind?" I asked. "I'll handle Mother," he said, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's just boring donor stuff anyway. You'd be miserable." Something felt off. His insistence, the subtle shift in his tone, the way he avoided my gaze. It all pointed to something I wasn't ready to confront. But the letter. It burned in the back of my mind. I sat on the couch for a few minutes, pretending to read, my thoughts racing. When I finally heard the shower running upstairs, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I opened the letter, tearing it open with shaking hands. The words inside were simple, but they struck me like a slap to the face, same time, same place. "Don't keep me waiting again." I froze, unable to process it at first. It didn't make sense. My eyes flicked back to the pile of letters I had just tossed the envelope into, a sharp pang of betrayal tightening my chest. But how could this be real? My mind spun, searching for some kind of explanation, anything that made sense other than this. Ethan, my husband, the man I had built a life with, was involved in something I had never even considered. The sound of the shower stopped, and I quickly resealed the envelope. My hands trembled as I slipped it back into the pile, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to act normal. I had to pretend like nothing had changed. But the truth was already in motion. There was no turning back now. When Ethan finally came down, dressed in his best suit, he looked like the man I had fallen for. But his smile was empty. "Sure you don't mind?" he asked, grabbing his keys. His gaze lingered on me for a moment, but it was distant, distracted. "Go," I said, my voice steady. "Have fun." He kissed me goodbye, the cold press of his lips lingering for just a moment longer than usual. I watched him leave, his Mercedes pulling out of the driveway, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. I had just uncovered a piece of the truth, one I wasn't ready for. But it wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The journey had just begun. And as I watched the lights of his car disappear into the distance, I grabbed my phone, trembling slightly. It was time to find out what Ethan was really hiding. I dialed Lily's number, the familiar voice of my best friend offering a small shred of comfort. But my gut was telling me something I didn't want to hear. "Lily, it's bad," I whispered into the phone. "Really bad." Her voice was soft but firm. "Trust your gut, Harper. When has your instinct ever been wrong?" I swallowed hard. Because deep down, I knew. My gut was right. It always had been. But could I handle the truth once I faced it? Could I handle everything that would come next? I didn't know. But I had to find out. There was no turning back now. The letter had been tucked away under a stack of mail, its ivory paper burning a hole in my mind the moment I laid eyes on it. I had no idea why, but I felt something stir deep inside me as I turned it over. The handwriting was delicate, flowing, and unlike anything I'd ever seen from Ethan. It had a certain elegance, almost like it was meant to evoke emotion. I knew it wasn't just junk mail. I knew something was wrong. I almost convinced myself to let it be. After all, the life I had with Ethan was built on trust, wasn't it? The years we spent together, years filled with dinners, laughter, and shared dreams, didn't those moments count for something? But as I stood there, staring at the envelope, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. My heart beat harder in my chest, as if it knew something I didn't. The moment I picked up that envelope, everything started to shift. I heard Ethan's footsteps approaching from the stairs. He had just finished his phone call, likely with his mother, Eleanor, who always seemed to have some new obligation for us. My mind was racing, but I forced myself to act natural, to pretend everything was fine. I shoved the envelope deep into the pile of bills, out of sight, but I could still feel its weight, still hear the pulse of uncertainty growing louder in my ears. When Ethan entered the room, he was the epitome of calm and control. His perfectly pressed shirt and the expensive watch on his wrist were enough to make anyone believe that he had it all together. His smile was the same confident one I had fallen for all those years ago at a mutual friend's gallery opening. He walked over to me and placed a gentle kiss on my forehead. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. Inside, I was anything but tired. I was terrified. But I wasn't ready to admit that yet. "How about pizza for dinner?" he suggested, glancing at his watch. "Sweetheart, remember, Mother's hosting that charity thing at the house. We need to be there by 7. "Right, another one of those nights. Another family obligation." I had forgotten, or maybe I just didn't want to remember. The last thing I wanted was to spend hours in a room full of people pretending to care about causes they'd forgotten the next day. But I couldn't say no. Not again. "Let me just change," I said, my voice barely audible, distracted by the quiet thrum of panic inside me. But before I could even get up, Ethan surprised me. "Actually, why don't you skip this one?" His voice was casual, but there was something strange about it. Something unfamiliar. "You've been working so hard lately. Take the evening off. Relax." I blinked. This was unexpected. Ethan never told me to skip a family event, not unless there was something seriously wrong. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my attempt to hide it. "Won't your mother mind?" "I'll handle Mother," he said, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's just boring donor stuff anyway. You'd be miserable." His words felt like an offhand dismissal. It was like he had already made up his mind for me. My stomach twisted, a feeling of unease settling in my chest. I watched him leave for the stairs, heading to change, and for a moment, everything around me felt distant, like I was watching him through a fogged glass. The letter. I couldn't get it out of my mind. I sat down on the couch, pretending to read, but my mind was 1,000 miles away. I could still feel the weight of that ivory envelope in my hand, the words inside haunting me with their simple, cold message, same time, same place. Don't keep me waiting again. The implications hit me like a ton of bricks. I could barely breathe. My hand shook as I tried to process the words. The truth I had feared seemed to be staring me in the face, daring me to face it. Ethan wasn't just busy with work or family. He had been hiding something else. Someone else. The sound of the shower upstairs snapped me out of my thoughts. I couldn't let him come down and see me like this. I quickly resealed the envelope, trying to make it look as though nothing had changed, slipping it back into the pile of mail. My heart raced, but I forced myself to calm down. I had to play it cool. I had to pretend. When Ethan came back down, dressed in his best suit, he looked like the man I had married, the man I thought I knew. But now, with every glance, there was a wall between us, a wall I couldn't see through. "Sure you don't mind?" he asked, grabbing his keys and heading for the door. "Go," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Have fun." He kissed me on the cheek, and I watched him leave. His car pulled out of the driveway, and the sound of the engine faded as he disappeared down the street. The moment the tail lights were out of sight, I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed Lily's number. My best friend. The only person who could help me make sense of this mess. But deep down, I already knew. I knew there was no going back. Lily answered on the second ring, her voice soothing despite the panic I could hear in mine. "Lily," I whispered, "I found something." My voice wavered as I spoke. "Something about Ethan. It's bad. It's really bad. Trust your gut, Harper." Lily's voice was calm, but insistent. "When has your instinct ever been wrong?" Her words echoed in my head as I glanced at the clock. It was time. Time to find out what Ethan had been hiding all along. Time to uncover the truth that had been lurking in the shadows of our perfect life. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but this was no longer about just finding out the truth. It was about confronting the life I had built, piece by piece, and deciding whether or not it was worth saving. The journey had just begun. As the days passed, the weight of the envelope remained in my mind, the nagging feeling never quite fading. Ethan had left, his parting kiss feeling colder than usual, and I was left alone with nothing but unanswered questions. I spent the evening in silence, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. What had I stumbled upon? What was the depth of Ethan's deception? I had always known that Ethan was a successful businessman, his life polished, seemingly flawless. The designer clothes, the grandiose charity events, the frequent meetings with the elite, all of it had painted a picture of wealth and privilege, one I had willingly stepped into. But was it all real? Was the man I married the person I thought he was, or had I been living in a carefully constructed lie? That night, as the hours stretched on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Ethan's world than I had ever been allowed to see. I paced the house, looking at our things, our shared possessions, and wondered how many of them had been bought with secrets. How many of them were financed by lies? My thoughts returned to the letter. The words "same time, same place. Don't keep me waiting" again echoed in my mind, and I realized the truth wasn't just about infidelity, it was about money. I had no concrete evidence yet, but something in my gut told me that Ethan's relationship with Celeste wasn't just emotional. It was financially motivated. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that everything I had known about him was perhaps just a facade. The following morning, I couldn't wait any longer. I had to dig deeper, find the truth. I had to know how far the lies went. I started with the obvious, the things he had left behind, the small details he had carelessly forgotten. As I went through his things, I stumbled upon a receipt, a small slip of paper that I had overlooked in the past. It was from a hotel, the Four Seasons. My heart skipped a beat. The same hotel mentioned in those hushed conversations, the one he had visited with Celeste. The date on the receipt was the same night he had been at Eleanor's charity event. But there was more. Tucked away in his drawer, behind the neatly organized folders, I found a bank statement. My hands trembled as I read it. A series of large transfers, some labeled as payment for services, others simply marked as family expenses. I couldn't make sense of it at first, but then it clicked. Ethan had been embezzling money from his company's accounts, using it to pay off Celeste. He was buying her silence, paying her to stay quiet about whatever it was she knew. It wasn't just an affair, it was a financial web of lies. I felt sick. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was criminal. How long had he been doing this? How long had he been manipulating me, controlling me with the false pretenses of a perfect life? I had no answers yet, but one thing was clear: the man I had trusted, the man I had built a life with, was not who he appeared to be. The discovery hit me like a freight train. I sat there, in our living room, surrounded by the pieces of his deception, unable to process it all. How could I have missed this? How could I have been so blind? I knew what I had to do next. I needed to confront him. But how? How could I even begin to address the magnitude of his betrayal, knowing that it was not just about love or trust but money, power, and control? But as I sat there, the realization slowly set in: this wasn't just about confronting Ethan anymore. It was about understanding the extent of the manipulation. This wasn't a simple affair or a one-time mistake. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to deceive not only me but everyone around him. The more I dug into the financial documents, the more I realized that Ethan wasn't just taking money from his business. The transactions were to Celeste's name, too. They weren't small amounts either. There were hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into what seemed like secret accounts. There was even a line item marked settlement on one of the documents. My chest tightened as I realized just how deep this betrayal ran. At that moment, I couldn't stop the tremor that ran through me. I felt as though the ground beneath me had shifted, and nothing was stable anymore. Ethan hadn't just been unfaithful emotionally. He had used the marriage as a cover for his financial misconduct. The lies were so much bigger than I had imagined. I felt torn between disbelief and fury. The realization that Ethan had used me as a pawn in his games, not just emotionally but financially, hit harder than anything else. I had trusted him with my life, my dreams, and now, I was forced to question everything. Was our marriage just a front? Was I simply a player in his carefully constructed illusion of a perfect life? And Celeste, the woman he had been seeing, was more than just an affair partner. She was part of the puzzle that had been carefully put together over time. She had known about the manipulation, had been involved in it, and had kept quiet, for money. The layers of this deception were unraveling before my eyes. As I sat there holding the evidence, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lily. I hadn't told her yet about my discoveries, but now it felt necessary. I was on the verge of something bigger than myself, and I needed someone to talk to. I had no idea how I would confront Ethan, how I could ever trust him again, but I knew one thing: the truth had to come out. I couldn't live in this lie any longer. The lies Ethan had spun were becoming increasingly difficult to untangle, and the more I uncovered, the more I realized how much he had been controlling every aspect of my life. This wasn't just about Celeste or money, this was about power and control. Ethan had used his charm, his influence, and his wealth to create a world where he was the master of everything, including me. And now, everything was crashing down. It was only a matter of time before Ethan would have to answer for his actions. But before I could confront him, I needed to understand the full scope of his betrayal. I wasn't ready to let him off easy, no matter how charming or manipulative he could be. I had to stand up for myself, for the truth. And I was determined to do whatever it took to bring it all to light. As I prepared to face Ethan, the last shred of my doubt faded away. There was no more pretending, no more silence. This was the moment of reckoning. I was ready to fight for the truth.